Okay, we are recording. So, good morning. Welcome everyone to the Wind Beneath Your Wings, Tips for Being an Ally in the Self-Advocacy Movement. It's August 14th, 2017. It is a beautiful Monday morning. This is Green Mountain Self-Advocates, and we have a few presenters today to talk about this great subject. I'll just let everyone introduce themselves.
And I'm Max Barrows. I'm Outreach Director of Green Mountain Self-Advocates.
I'm Randy Lazar. I am the current board president of Green Mountain Self-Advocates.
I'm Tammy Mayberry. I'm an ally for Advocates for Actions Self-Advocacy group in Bells Falls, Vermont.
Hello, everybody. My name is Topper, and I work for Green Mountain Self-Advocates, but I also serve as an ally to Capital Advocates Together. It's a local group here in Montpelier, Vermont.
Hi again, I'm Skye Peebles, and I also work at Green Mountain Self-Advocates as an ally, and I have been lucky enough to visit a number of different local groups with Max and Topper kind of over the years, and enjoyed getting to know groups. Really nice to have everyone here today. And I'll just do a couple of quick housekeeping things in case people don't know about GoToMeeting. Just please mute yourself, like hit the little green microphone to red. If you have questions or comments, just type them in the chat box at the bottom of your control panel. Ignore the raise your hand because that's actually not something we can do. And just, let us know, type a message if you're having any technical issues. And we will email all the handouts and the PowerPoint to everyone at the end. And we will be having 2 follow-up phone calls in September to talk about more tips for being an ally and more sort of, questions that people have and things that people would like to explore more. So we'll be doing those probably in September and October. So we will email those dates out. So stay tuned. And we just want to quickly mention that GMSA has a lot of information on our website. And also we have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and YouTube. And they are all updated all the time with lots of new resources and videos and messages from Max and Randy and everyone at GMSA. So check us out online. And we will also have all this information posted online. And I'll turn it over to Max to tell us about GMSA.
Alrighty, so for those of you who don't know who Green Mountain Self-Advocates is, we are a peer organization. I call an organization. And what we do is we give a lot of support to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but it's not like the kind of services that you may think of at first as you can see on the slide. What we do is we support people to speak up for themselves and others and make a difference and really encourage them to believe in themselves. And so, of course, like I said, well, actually, I didn't say this. We have 23 local groups throughout the state of Vermont with over 600 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities involved, and all groups run their own meetings at the own times that fit for them. And allies, help out, but they don't run the meetings themselves. They are behind the curtain, and they will, they're there in case they need, people with disabilities need support to, help run their own meetings. So I mentioned 23 local groups if you want to see like who they are. And this is a map of all the groups that are in Vermont, and each one has a name. Of course, mine is, Capital Advocates Together, but you got, all kinds of groups throughout Vermont, and there's the map of where they're all located. I'm curious to know if you want to go visit one someday, or maybe or want to find out of one in your area. So there you have it.
And I'm wondering if I could ask Randy, would you like to add a few words about how you would describe Green Mountain Self-Advocates? What our purpose is, why do we exist, what we're trying to get accomplished?
I'd just like to add it's a really, really great resource if you're looking for support to start a group.
Well said. Alrighty, thank you, Randy, for that. So let's start by getting on the same page here. And when we say self-advocacy or self-advocate, this is what we mean. Self-advocacy is the civil rights movement for individuals and organizations to empower people with this intellectual and developmental disabilities to speak for ourselves, make our own decisions, and stand up for our rights. And, you know, we just, as you can see on the slide here, that's what we're all about, you know, and it is a civil rights group. And so, you know, just think about the civil rights history from, like, you know, previous civil rights movements, such as for, you know, African Americans, people of color, people that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, you know, women's rights. And so our work is based off civil rights. And so that's what we go off of. And so moving on, there is a video that kind of has me in it, as you can see. And if you would like to see or hear what I have to say, we could do that. So, you know, here I am recorded.
I would like to explain the concept of what we mean when we say the word self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is a civil rights movement. The purpose of self-advocacy is to empower people with developmental and other disabilities to speak up for ourselves, make our own decisions, and to recognize and respond to forms of discrimination and people being treated unfairly. Self-determination and self-advocacy go hand in hand. Remember, it's my life. You know, people's input and opinions are helpful, but when it really, really comes down to it, it's what I say matters. It's what I think that really matters. You know, I may rely on other people's support, and the same goes with people with disabilities in general. But really, what it comes down to is I'm in the driver's seat, and not just me, but people with disabilities are really the ones in the driver's seat. Because who knows us better than we know ourselves?
Well, Self-Advocacy has changed my life because it gave me a voice, and I had low functioning when I first before started Self-Advocacy in 2006. So, and because of getting involved with Self-Advocacy, I have a voice. I'm making new friends every day.
Self-advocacy is really all about helping other people, helping yourself stand up and find your voice. It helps if you can speak up for yourself. That's one thing I work on constantly with Good Mountain Self-Advocacy, to get speaking up for myself and being a voice for those who maybe don't feel like they have a voice, who feel like they've been ignored for too long, and they need someone who can help them. Also, you know, don't talk about us behind our backs, or, you know, presume just because we have a disability that we can't do, you know, do stuff. You know, just presume that we were capable of being awesome, and that we're people. We have feeling that we can do, you know, what people without disabilities can do. Sometimes we can do it a little bit better. So that's the one big takeaway I hope you guys get from this video.
So that's the gist of what self-advocacy is and what it's all about. So next, when we say the word ally, this is what we mean. An ally is someone who helps a self-advocacy group. In lots of self-advocacy groups, the ally is not a person with a disability. We are using the word ally in this webinar, but it, pretty much what it means is an ally is there to give support to self-advocates, but they are really there to only support and not to take over or control. Like, for example, in our local groups, allies was meant, like I mentioned before, they are behind the curtain, but they are, visible enough where in case, people in the group get stuck with making decisions, an ally may, educate them about what a decision may mean, but not make it for them. So they're there really to give, neutral support if need be. And also too, just in movement matters, they stand up for people with disabilities, but they really encourage us to stand up for ourselves, because they know that it's our lives that matter. And who knows us better than we know ourselves?
Hey Max, this is Topper speaking. Hey, so when you talk about this term, like behind the curtain, can you tell me a little bit more what you mean by that?
And what I mean is, they don't control, like for a meeting, they don't control the meeting. They don't make the decisions for people with disabilities. They are there to support people to make a decision based off what a decision means, and also to make sure people with disabilities are the ones, taking, control of their lives, and encourage them to do that instead of them doing it. So I would say more in a civil rights term, though. I would probably steer toward that direction, because think of our history. When, the civil rights movement happened for, people of color, or African Americans, white people were, allies of that movement. They stood side by side with, people of color. And then for, LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, the questioning movement, people that are straight are allies of, that movement. So, putting that in, and then for men, they're allies of, the women's rights movement. So also in this case, people that do not have disabilities are allies of, the rights for people with disabilities in their movement. But they stand with us. And so that's the direction I would go.
And Max, I'm going to ask you one more question, if it's all right, Tammy and Skye and Randy. So bring us up to date here just a little bit. So this word ally, we've both been involved in the self-advocacy movement, myself more than, it's going on 30 years here. So beginning, the ally word is kind of like in the last 10 years or so. Can you talk a little bit about the other words that were used to refer to one who's kind of like an ally to the movement?
Advisor.
Yeah.
Here, yes, advisor was the most common used, but we have found that, like I said, ally is, we find that ally is more of a word that we use to describe somebody who supports people with disabilities. There's been controversy on the state and even national levels that advisor, it kind of can sound like, there's some like they may, you know, the word itself may sound like somebody who supports the rights of people with disabilities, but like it's more of a controlling or a biased term. As for, we focus on ally because that's more of a, you know, like I said before, a civil, you know, it's used in the civil rights matter of like, you know, supporting a movement. And so we, in the last 10 years, have tried to steer away from the word advisor and use the word ally in that matter, if that makes sense.
But it's all good.
But I mean, if people want to use the word advisor, that's great. But
sometimes they've used the word facilitator too. So, so certainly we want to just put out respect and a big thanks and to all the people without disabilities who support the self-advocacy movement. We just wanted to kind of put it out there, especially because a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they may think of the word advisor in kind of like a real strict way that, oh, that's the person who's going to, you know, give me advice about what I need to do. And so, so I think because of that, people are thinking like, hey, let's give this word ally a try because it doesn't have like a kind of a bigger definition that can kind of influence you know, influence the whole relationship between the person with a disability and the people that support them in the movement. And, you know, and it's, you know, we're going to turn it over to other people now to kind of talk about this whole issue, but you know, there already is a dynamic, there already is, you know, the relationship between people with and without disability is already kind of set up in such a way that a lot of times people without disabilities are in situations where they're telling people with disabilities what to do. So, so within the self-advocacy movement, people wanted to say, well, this is self-advocacy and this, we're shifting that a little bit. And so this was just one way to kind of do that. So, all right, to you guys.
And Topper, to add too, we're going to talk about a lot of good ally resources that we found, but ally is also kind of a nice word to use because there's so much out there outside of the disability rights movement about how to be a good ally, like Max was talking about. So if you're looking for more resources beyond what we have, you know, if you just do a Google about it, I think you can also find a lot of good information just because that word is used very popular, you know, it's a popular word in a lot of movements. So that's another nice thing about it. But I'll hand it to Tammy to give our recipe.
To prepare for this webinar, we looked at some handbooks and resources and came up with a list of ingredients for being a great ally. These ideas came from self-advocates and other allies. I'll go over this list and then we'll go in more detail. Number one is listening, treating people with respect, staying in the background, you should not run the meeting, slow down and step back. If someone asks a question, support a peer to answer, get everyone involved and give them a chance to speak up. Present options only after peer leaders have had a chance to problem solve. Be neutral and please do not control. Promote decision making. Focus on people's strengths and presume competency. Make information understandable for all. Be open to making mistakes and learning. And most of all, have fun. The number one thing an ally should always do is to listen to the self-advocates in the group. Ask what does the group want, and then stop to hear what they say. Let the group members talk. This means support staff and allies should be quiet. Listen to people's stories and ideas. Don't take sides when there is an argument in the group.
And then Max and Randy, I don't know if you would like to maybe talk a little bit about providing ways for people who use alternative ways to communicate to, to make sure they're listened to, and also to talk about listening to your officers or your leadership team. I don't know if either of you would maybe talk a little bit about why those are important.
I would probably say in this regard, I think that people that use different forms of communication, I think it's really important to include people who use different forms of communication because they have a voice too. Not being able to speak is not the same as not having anything to say. That's a quote that I did not make up, but it's a good quote. I really think that making sure that, people who use different forms of communication are included in the movement, but also just, also listened to as well, because it's very easy for them to slip through the cracks, especially when, people are still kind of used to, the so-called typical way of speaking. And also sometimes people just, go too fast for them to, keep up in meetings, such as like not checking in with them or not being patient with them when they're trying to type out or communicate what they're trying to say. So I would say any methods that require, patience and also just checking in with them are important when, they're involved in discussions that are important about people's lives. And really just, including them in the movement more and just making sure, because they have a voice too, and, their voice, counts just as much as, ours. Do you have anything to say, Randy, on that regard?
I do. Sometimes it's a good thing if people use alternative communication that you kind of have a conversation with them before the meeting or meetings so that they have time to prepare questions if they have any.
And hey, Randy, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of like the, I hate using this word, but kind of like the unique, I use the word, I like this word, unique way that allies should be listening to officers or the leadership of the team, of the group?
I need a little bit more of an explanation of that.
So that's one thing for the allies in general to be listening to all the members of the group. But, the allies do have a kind of a special relationship, or they have a different kind of relationship, I think, with the officers. And so can you think of what's worked with you, and because you've been an officer, you're an officer now, what are ways that, any suggestions you have for how allies can make sure that they're really listening or, seeking out what the officers or the leaders have to say?
Well, be patient for one, because not everybody takes the same amount of time to respond to questions or things that are being said. They may need a little bit of extra time to process things.
Great. Right.
And kind of learn their teaching or their style of leading.
I would also add too that like the allies should really reach out and touch base with the leadership team or officers as well. I also, and to be honest, I think that allies listening to, officers or a leadership team is actually a very good method of learning for them.
Anything else, Max, or should I go to number 2?
I would also say to be like, also just be respectful of people's, emotions too, and be, respectful of, I would say just, just be supportive of people's feelings as well, is, I think, an important role for an ally as well. I think the next.
That's a perfect.
Go ahead. So unless somebody else had anything to say, I'm sorry to jump over them. I would say it kind of goes into this. Respect is so important, in your role, like as an ally. And we think that, this means like, to be open to everyone's like ideas, so have an open mind to ideas that people come up with. Feel comfortable with people with all different kinds of disabilities. Really understand people's disabilities, so they can get the accommodations they need. Understand labels. Now, this is really, really important for an ally, is to understand labels in their meetings. Such as client, consumer, and of course mental, mental retardation, and just how hurtful they can be, and use respectful person first language as an example here, like I am a person with autism, instead of just autistic, and treat people like adults, not children. Really treat people the way, you would want to be treated. And I, again, I'm sorry, but before I said all of that, was there something, Skye, that you wanted to say?
No, thank you. I think you maybe, I was just clearing my throat. No, that's great, Max. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll go to number 3. And Randy, so this is staying in the background, and you should not run the meeting. I wonder, Randy, do you have any thoughts about self-advocates running the meetings and how allies, can ask the group if they want help, and sort of how to step up and step back as an ally?
I do. I would like to kind of refer back to what Max said about the man behind the curtain idea. That was a great way to explain it. So sometimes people and groups in this case need to be able to fail in order to know what success is. So unless we ask for your help, just kind of let us do our thing and learn from our mistakes. And don't assume that you know what we want to do. You should ask if you have questions.
Max, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm sorry for interrupting. I would say a thing to add to for allies, it's really important, like when they attend officer leadership team meetings, because really that is the way for them to like really understand and take the role of just supporting and not taking control of the meeting. Is really having officer or leadership team meetings is really kind of like the golden key to all this.
And this is Topper. I just would like to say I completely agree with you, Max. Whenever we've been involved in giving support, technical assistance to a local group, and this is the issue where the self-advocates are struggling to run the meeting. I mean, what happens is it's not like, allies are, it's not like they're evil and they want to control and take over everything, although that could be the case sometimes. But it's just like what happens is it's hard to be at a meeting and the self-advocates are not stepping up and kind of running and making things run smoothly. There's a natural tendency for the allies to want to step in. And so whenever we've seen that kind of situation, pretty much 95% of the time, the situation is resolved by really working with the group to have very effective officer meetings, because the officer meetings or the leadership team meetings, whichever your group has, is a place for everybody to practice, for the self-advocates to practice what they're going to do on running the meeting, and then they know how, they have the experience, and then they can step in and do it. So I don't know if Randy, you have something else to add about that, or if we just move on, but anyways, yeah. Thank you.
Well, actually, I do. I think it's a learning experience for everybody. So we don't always know what we're doing. So we do need help sometimes. But like I said before, ask before you assume.
You got the next one.
So there's this awesome quote from Tracy Thrasher here, who I've worked alongside. Great man. There is a need in this area for those supporting self-advocacy to slow down and step back. It may seem to some that is more efficient to make an active role in getting this off the ground. It is a hollow effort that simply reinforces passivity and apathy on the part of the self-advocate. It seems much better for us to support the meeting happening than allow it to unfold at its own pace. It may sometimes be necessary for us to remind each other of this. That is a Tracy Thrasher, who, is a very, well-spoken, advocate and also poetic.
I'm wondering, Skye or Tammy, do you have anything you want to add about that, or what that says to you?
I think it's put really well. I think at times I see myself as an ally in the group meeting, trying to step back as I sometimes overspeak, and I try to encourage others to take over the meeting because this is their meeting, this is for them. So, yeah, I think you put it really nice.
And this is Skye. I second what Tammy was just saying. I mean, I think, I'm just someone who I think in all parts of my life need to be reminded to slow down. So it's important, I think, to be really deliberate about it, to keep it in to keep it in the forefront of your mind, and not sort of have it be like a side thing that you remember, but have it be like, one of like your goals for the meeting is to make sure that the meeting is going at the pace that it should be going at, and that's exactly where it should be, just to kind of remind yourself, have that be the, maybe your focus for the meeting, is to remember that. But I think it speaks to me a lot.
I think you guys hit some really good, you two hit some really good points there, like how you've recognized too that sometimes you can kind of speak too much or overly, and then you catch yourself and remind yourself. That's actually good, because you're actually in a way like evaluating your performance. And
you know what, Max, I find really helpful? In fact, the most helpful is when somebody says to me, hey, slow down, or hey, stop talking. Like, I think that's, I need to hear that sometimes. So or all the time. I need to, anytime it happens, I need someone to rein and to speak up. So I think people should feel like other allies. I don't think people should ever feel like offended by having someone like tell them to slow down or to maybe step back. I think that kind of open communication, I think, shows trust in a lot of ways. If someone, feels comfortable telling you like you need to, dial it back, then I think that's a really positive thing. I don't know if other Tammy or Topper would agree with that, but
we have experienced in our group at times, like for voting and stuff, you can see some of the support staff really want this to happen, but yet it's not our place to be in the vote. And it's nice to listen to others say that, hey, your vote doesn't count. It's our meeting. It's our vote. It's what we want. And that has, you sit back and listen to that. And it's true. This is their meeting, your meeting, not ours. We're here to help if you need the help. So yeah.
I know everybody's spoken a lot, but we just had a meeting this morning, Max and I won't get into the details, but we are working with a couple officers whose group is struggling, and so we were working with them, and their allies were there too, and just the few times that I remember I stood back and said, wait a minute, so can you tell me what we just talked about? And so the times that people could not repeat back what we had just said was like ding, 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 it was like all of a sudden it was like alarms for me to know, like, I need to slow down. I need to explain this in a different way. People are not really hearing, so just, I think it's just, keeping ourselves honest by just always checking in and seeing just because it's been said that everybody understood, or or as Tracy calls it, a hollow effort. So just kind of always testing, is this been a hollow effort? Am I just talking to myself, or are people really understanding and kind of embracing what it is that be it an officer or an ally, just always making sure that people are comprehending what's going on. So
yeah.
I agree with that. So, I guess with this slide here, so we have some things Randy and I are going to go over, and Randy, if you want to take turns reading some of these with me, but if someone asks a question, support a peer to answer. Self-advocates say the truth comes from us. If you want to read the second one, Randy.
Okay. Have self-advocates teach and help each other.
You're good. So Max, just give us some examples, or give us maybe either examples or reasons why in a situation it's really so if someone in the group asks a question, why is it more important for peers to answer that and not allies? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Because you're encouraging peers to help each other out and speak up better, and also it's a way to actually get peers to be comfortable with speaking up more too, and it's also a way for allies to sort of step back but also step up at the same time without taking control.
And what's the difference? So this morning we were working with some officers. What's the difference if the information is coming from me or if it's coming from you? Are there any differences in that way?
I think if it was coming from a self-advocate or a peer, I think that it shows that, they are, getting into the comfort of, really stepping up and taking more like control of, the meeting. And also like they know like in their hearts like what's going on. They may, just keep in mind that sometimes they may need help with explaining things, but really it's a way to have them sort of be, kind of in charge of saying, well, why don't I help out with the situation, or why don't I, help this person out, and sort of like helping another peer. Allies, sometimes again, it could feel like they could, take control or maybe like take over the meeting in a way that it shouldn't be. And we're trying to like, diminish that risk.
Randy, what about you? What are some other comments you can think about to talk about how, like peer-to-peer, how that, when peer-to-peer, the connections are coming from peer-to-peer, information's flowing from peer-to-peer, how that can be powerful?
Max, I'd like to ask you a question. If you were if you had an issue, who would you be more likely to go to? Somebody, an ally who may or may not know what you're going through, or somebody like a peer who may have a better idea of what you're going through?
A peer who may have a better idea of what you're going through.
And why is that?
Because they can, because peers, when they connect, they can relate to any situation or being, any challenges that they face, and they like peers, just connecting with each other really is more, I guess, like comforting in a way where they don't have to rely on someone that may kind of steering them in a direction where they don't want to go, or the information or may seem or feel like it's too controlling or sugar-coated. And really it's more direct with a peer because they have been in this, they are in the same shoes as you, and they know through experience what it is that you're that you're going through as a peer yourself. So pretty much it's like they can, relate, and they use like their experience going through whatever it is you're going through to kind of work with you to get through whatever it is you're getting through experiencing in that themselves. Allies, they could, have some sort of understanding, but not quite in the same way.
And the other thing I'd like to say is people don't always approach the same problem the same way. That they might have a different idea than you do. So
yeah, Tammy and I are nodding. You can probably hear us. We're nodding. I'll go on to number 6. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, we're good.
Yep.
Get everyone involved and give them a chance to speak up. We all know there's some people that they are quiet, and there's some people that talk a lot. I can be one of them in my job. So I know how it is. An ally can help officers find a balance so that everyone gets a chance to speak. The group should figure out how to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. Some ideas that the groups use, like brainstorming, would be do the round robin, go around the room and give everyone a chance to speak up, or start with an icebreaker. So in our group, we like to start off with introductions going around so everybody has a chance to say something. And then we see, if there's questions out there and a lot of people are talking, and we see that others are not talking, we usually try to say, hey, so-and-so, what's your thought on this? Just to try to get everybody a chance to have input. I think that's really important.
And so, I mean, I think one of the roles of an ally too in that is like when you have your pre-team, you know, like you have your meeting with your leadership, like the president, the vice president, whoever your leadership team, your officers beforehand. You know, ask the officers, how can I help you? You know, how can I support you to make sure that everyone is sticking to the plan? Like, you know, how can I be helping to make sure that that happens? So, again, having the officers and the leaders of the group make sure that everyone's getting a chance to talk, but you as the ally, you know, can help them make a plan for that, and then, you know, support them in case the plan is kind of going off the rails, in case it's not working out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the next part, and this is very similar, is making sure that everyone in the group is involved and making sure that self-advocates, you know, so then ally, I think self-advocates are involved in all of the planning. So for example, let's say, like, you know, the group has decided that they want to invite in some guest speakers to talk about volunteering in the community. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. That every step of that activity should be the self-advocates and everyone in the group making the decisions and deciding what they want to do and how they want to, you know, take the lead in making this activity happen. And so, you know, as a leadership, maybe as a, you know, the officers, when they have the meeting beforehand, and Max and Randy, I want to jump in if I'm, you know, if you want to add to this, but I think, you know, as you're having your leadership meeting, maybe the officers will make a list of what the tasks to be done are. And then in the meeting, you're inviting, you know, self-advocates get to sign up for whatever role that they want to do to help the project happen. But it's not an ally assigning jobs to people. It's people getting involved and everyone having some sort of a role that they pick themselves. And I think that, you know, maybe in an ally role, you'll know group members well, and the leadership group will also know group members well. So you can maybe think about brainstorming roles that will help people be able to participate in a real way. And then think about how group members like to communicate and how they like to learn. Like Randy was saying earlier, everyone has kind of a different style. So I think one role of an ally is you know, helping understand and helping the group understand how everybody in the group, you know, how people's peers, you know, like to learn something new, and then supporting the leadership group and the officers to make sure people are getting involved in ways they're comfortable with.
Skye, we our group meeting last month, we do a lot of fundraising, and it's really important that the advocates take part in this and, you know, really set it up like for our dances, be responsible for making sure I assist by helping get in the spot, but as when it comes for food and who the DJ, the advocates take that and, you know, and set that up. So we're talking about doing a carnival. And so one of the advocates at our last meeting last month said, well, we should have a committee. Let's do a carnival committee to decide who's going to do what. So we're trying it this month. Actually, we're meeting this week to meet. Each group will have so many advocates on the committee, and we're going to meet. Myself and another ally are going to meet with the advocates and decide how we're going to do the carnival, which I thought was really great for an advocate to speak up and say, let's have a committee. Yeah. So.
Max, Randy, do you want to pipe in, add anything?
So I do. I want to say that there isn't a role that is too small or too big. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is, because in our group, we have people who do something as simple as be the contact person if you're not going to come or be late, and they're happy to do it. So, like I said, there's no role too small or too big for people.
Thanks, Randy. That's great.
I think Max is good, but I just want to add also.
Oh, sorry, Topper. Yes.
Sometimes we have people complain. You know, we say, well, nobody else is chipping in and helping out or something like that. So of course, everything you all described is perfect. You have a list and you make it doable for people and all of that. The one little suggestion I'm going to put in there is sometimes it could be good to have more than one member of the group, more than one self-advocate sign up for a task. So, because if you have just one self-advocate signing up for each task and then they get support from their support person, we again are kind of reinforcing that notion that, you know, the person has to rely on their support person to figure out what to do next or to take action. And so I've seen some groups where they've like had friends sign up together to do a task, and then you're already again creating the notion that people are going to rely on each other to kind of get something done or look to each other for an answer or problem solve together. And so it's just another way to kind of practice that. So anyway, thank you.
That's great.
And I'd like to add that when people volunteer to do the things like be the contact person or bring in snacks each week or what have you. So it's not like the same person has to do it all the time.
Yeah. We'll turn it over to Max and Randy for number 7.
Okay, so number 7, and Randy and I will go back and forth here. So, you know, this is all about, you know, presenting options only after peer leaders have had a chance to problem solve and be neutral and please do not control. So the way to approach this is, and I'll go first, brainstorm options, support members to weigh the pros and cons.
Don't assume you know what the group wants to do.
Lay out options after members brainstorm ideas.
Self-advocates say, be our equals, not our boss.
Don't set goals for the group. Instead, help groups complete their goals by helping to make plans, set up tasks, and complete tasks.
Give natural, factual information that helps people make decisions.
I kind of think like this is the thing I had the hardest problem with as an ally, and that is I love to solve problems. I love to brainstorm. I love to do all that. But Max is sitting there laughing. And so, you know, so it is so hard to kind of like sit back and, you know, this is again the Tracy Thrasher quote, you know, like the hollow effort, you know, so it can be a hollow effort if, you know, it's nice and helpful to have allies that want to jump in and solve the problem. But, you know, here's one of the, you know, here's where a roll of duct tape can come in handy. And just, you know, kind of just, you know, standing back. I mean, Max is laughing. I'll let you weigh in on why you're laughing here. But, you know, it's just like, it's the hard thing to do. Like you see, like, you know, you're looking at a situation and, you know, as an ally, you may have been in this situation a million times before. So for you, it's so clear what the answer could be, but it's an answer for you. It's not an answer for the group. So anyways, Max, you have anything you want to add on that?
Duct tape is rope. But in that case, I got nothing else really at the moment.
I have to say that's the hardest thing for me too, because I don't want to see anybody fail. Or so an example would be, you know, how we put on a lot of dances and stuff, and we all say what we're going to bring, and then at the last minute stuff isn't brought. So I'm running out gathering stuff, and I finally said a year ago when we come up to dances, whatever you guys sign up for, you're responsible for bringing. I will, support you, and I will bring the water and stuff, but if there's no food and snacks at these dances, then there's no food or snack there. You need to be responsible for what you sign up for. And teaching that, it took me a lot to be able to step back and let others, take the fall. And it only happened once. Now at our dances and stuff, there's tons of food and tons of snack, and they all step up to the plate, it took a while.
Yeah, I'm nodding here too. And Max will probably laugh at me too, but I'm also, someone who likes to jump in and figure things out. But I think the bottom point, give the facts that help people make decisions can sometimes be, I think, helpful for me. So like if, maybe people are trying to decide, what they, maybe a group was trying to decide what they want to spend money on. And you have ideas, obviously, but in your mind, but instead of saying, "Oh, this is too much money," or "Oh, this is too far," sort of say, "Okay, this costs this much." Well, we did some research, and this, if someone asks, "Well, how much this costs this much money, and this costs this much money, and this is the distance," and then just give. It's almost like it's kind of like that duct tape Topper's talking about, but sort of say, "Okay, here are the facts, and now I am stepping back and putting the duct tape back over my mouth." That can be a good reminder for me. And also someone, giving me a little nudge in the ribs, a little kick under the table. But
So I think I want to emphasize what I said earlier. It's not always a good thing. It's not always the popular answer, but sometimes we need to fail to kind of figure out what went wrong and how to do it better next time. So letting us actually fail at something.
Mm-hmm. I'm the next one. I'm number 8. And we talk a lot about making sure that practicing decision making is a big part of being in a self-advocacy group, I think. And it's a skill. It's like doing anything. Like the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And there's steps to making decisions. And part of being in a group, I think, is that all the group members, all the self-advocates need to understand the decision that's being made. That doesn't mean everyone needs to make the same decision. Everyone needs to agree. It just means that if there's a choice and the group needs to choose between a bunch of different things, everyone needs to understand what it is that they're choosing. And at GMSA, we have a lot of different strategy. We have a lot of different ways to help people figure out what choice they want to make. And it's really important, I think, that the groups practice these skills every meeting. And as an ally, you can really help, I think, the group practice these skills. Like literally every time there's a decision to be made, and it could be, in some kind of, Randy was saying, no, there's no, sort of to use your words, Randy, a little bit, like there's no decision that's too small or too big then you can practice anything. So, there's one of the resources that we looked at had these steps spelled out really nicely. So I thought I'd put them up on the screen. But, the first part about making a decision is you can and you can do this in your group by maybe writing, talk to your officers and see, what they want to do. But one way could be to use flip chart paper or a whiteboard and maybe make a list, write out the choices that the group has to make. Make a list, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, these are our options. And then, talk as a group about each of the options, think about what is good about option A, what is good about, option B, and have the group, or have not you, but, the officers brainstorm and everyone, what's going to work, and, thinking about what's worked and what hasn't worked before in your group, and then have the group choose what they want. So one way that, GMSA does this is what's called dot democracy. So if you have all of the choice, maybe the group is trying to decide where they want to, which legislator they want to visit first this year. Maybe that's a decision. Do you want to visit, Representative John, Representative Mike, or Representative Sally? And you've talked about why you would want to visit one over the other. Put their names all up, and then everyone gets a sticker, and then everyone gets to vote for which person they want to go see by putting the sticker next to the name of the person that they're interested in seeing first. So that would be one way that the group, everyone could choose. And again, peers, group members supporting each other to make decisions and to sort of talk about these pieces, I think is super, super important. So you could have, I don't know, Max and Randy, you have probably a million examples and other, ways that you've seen this happen in your groups. But I think that always finding, ways to practice this again and again and again, like builds muscle memory. So it's not like during one meeting, I think it's important not to say, okay, time's really short, so we're just going to not do, we're going to skip some steps. I think the more you practice each step, the better the group becomes, able to support each other to make really important decisions.
I actually have an example of what we're talking about. Each month, our group does a fun thing, whether it be a movie night or go on a trip somewhere. And especially with the movie nights, we have people come up with, this will go under listing of the choices, what movie they want to see. And then we talk about, and then we have people vote. And then and then we have people who volunteer to bring stuff. So those are kind of that kind of covers the first couple of, that kind of covers actually all three of them. So, and that's something that happens monthly. So yes, we see that a lot.
Max, do you have anything you wanted to, or Topper, or Tammy, anyone else wanted to pipe in on this?
Not at the moment.
All right. Thanks for that, Randy.
And number 9 is focus on strengths. Allies need to focus on strengths and abilities. Believe that everybody brings something to the table. Your job is to help discover what their talents are and how to share them in the group. Be creative. This is so true. Everybody brings something. I mean, some advocates cannot speak, but they want to speak, and that they want to say something just by their smiles and stuff. So we need to think of ways so they're able to participate in the group talk, whether it be a sign that they hold up saying that, they have really something they want to say, or make up something that they're able to use in the meeting is very important.
And I would like to say in that regard that this also kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is like including people that use different forms of communication. Not being able to speak is not the same as not having anything to say. And, non-readers are great at leading, or people that have trouble reading can also be great leaders. So yeah, to piggyback on what Tammy just said, in addition to going back to what I said before, yeah, everybody's got a way to participate, because taking advantage of somebody's strengths in a good way, really, having their strengths be used, I think is a good way to, it's excellent to get everyone involved. It's really an example of including everybody, no matter what.
and this is Topper. I just want to say one tool that we've used a lot is for a group to put together a group resume. And, you know, in that it can be a really fun thing to do with your whole group, where really helping people kind of identify what their talents are, what their special interests are, and all of that. And then you can just say, okay, so this is our group. We're capital advocates together, and here's all the amazing things that we're good at. And so, and if you have that, kind of like you might have your group agreements or any other sort of, you know, plans that you might have around resolving conflicts or something like that, you know, you kind of have that as the backdrop for your group. And, you know, people could add to it or change it over time. And then when something comes up, you know, especially if there's somebody that's shy or doesn't, you know, let's say volunteer a whole lot, and if you're working on putting together, maybe you're doing a community service project where you're planning to go help with a soup kitchen or something like that, and as you're looking at the tasks that are involved in doing that community service project, you can look to your resume and say, your group resume, and say, hey, wait a minute, what about, you know, Samantha? She is really good at, you know, she likes to hang out with water. She's really good with that. Maybe she'd be good at kind of helping us with the tasks that are, you know, involved in kind of washing things and getting them ready or whatever. So I'm just kind of making that up off the top of my head. But I do want to know what one of our local groups, they do a community garden, and they plant vegetables, and they grow for the local food shelf. And, you know, I've seen that group really involve people with all kinds of abilities to be able to get the gardens ready, to be able to plant, to water the vegetables, to harvest the vegetables, delivering them to the food shelf. And so anyways, just to kind of throw out there an idea about how to, as a way to really focus on people's strengths, but in a way that they can really actively get involved.
Topper, just another quick little example that just popped into my brain is, and people sometimes have like talents that you would never even think of because like, I don't know, because maybe it doesn't come up in day-to-day life. Like, you know, at this last conference we had, our big annual conference, we discovered that there's a bunch of people who are amazing at doing the robot dance. Like, think about how many great ways you could use the robot dance in an icebreaker or in, I don't know, like there's just, so that's sort of the fun, I think, is like, you know, people have, you know, these like awesome talents that, you know, maybe wouldn't come up when you're sitting around a conference table necessarily. So I think that, you know, finding ways to tease those out is one of the cool parts, because I would like to be at more meetings where people do the robot dance.
And, you know, also, Skye, thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, so you have this group resume, that's part of one of the things you hang up on the wall when your group's meeting, you know, and then you do an activity like, let's say, a community garden, and then somebody really shines, you know, somebody really contributes so much, then, you know, when you go back, you know, it's not even the allies, but the peers are saying, hey, wait a minute, I really saw so-and-so, and they do a really nice job of planting seeds. And, you know, I mean, so you can constantly add, and peers can add, you know, what they see the strengths in the people that are around them, you know. And so it's really a nice way to kind of also, you know, have people, you know, setting up an atmosphere where people are complimenting each other and noticing the contributions of their peers. And so then they have a place to kind of talk about that or add to it. And you could have it be part of your regular, you know, your regular agenda, like, okay, so how are we doing on our group resume? Did anybody see anybody this week or this last couple of weeks, you know, somebody, a member of the group, do something that was really, just really awesome, and what would you like to, you know, can we add it to their, you know, as part of our group resume or something like that? It can really be a way to really focus, you know, like you're saying, focusing on people's strengths.
And Max, I have the video on the next slide for this one, if you, just so you know.
Okay. I can explain what this is, though.
Yes. Wonderful.
All right, so, I would say one of the main ways all of this that we talked about is done is through presuming competence. And what I mean by that is when it's kind of like expanding it's another way of saying don't judge a book by its cover. And what we mean by that is when you see somebody with a disability, excuse me, when you see someone with a disability, don't assume that they can or cannot do things because of what you see at first. Have an open mind and get to know them, and then, let them decide and be in the driver's seat of what they can and cannot do, and it would be your job to provide them with the right accommodations for them to succeed in whatever it is they put their mind to if need be. I think that presuming competence goes, it puts the role of an ally in a good direction, because when an ally presumes competence of people with disabilities, then they really believe in a person's ability to make decisions effectively, and also to really have the person really kind of take charge of what it is they're taking charge of.
To presume competence, it means that all people with disabilities have abilities. It means not to judge a book by its cover. Really look at somebody and just know that even though they may have a different way of experiencing life, that they have a strength. To give more of an example of that, I have two great colleagues of mine who work with me on Green Mountain Self-Advocates who are sitting with me today, and they will share with you some great examples.
I'm Raymond Gordon. I'm the treasurer for Green Mountain Self-Advocates. And, like Max was saying, it's really important to presume competence. One personal example I have is there's a kid who I used to go to high school with, graduated with, good buddy of mine, who loved to put me down just because of my disability. Told me I wasn't going to go to college, get a job, this, that, and the other thing. And that hurt a lot. And so I kind of made it my personal mission to, prove him wrong about everything. And I graduated from Johnson State College last May. And I've been at my job over in Morrisville for, started in June of last year, so almost a year. And I've gradually picked up more and more hours. So confidence is huge. We can do it. We don't need help. We can do it.
I'm Stone Peoples. I'm the life history producer at Green Mountain Self-Advocates and a district educator. And it's all about perceptions. If one person doesn't judge you, you can show them and improve what you have to do. So, because of my abilities, I was able to go to St. College, Vermont, a program for intellectual and developmental disabilities to get a chance at education and lead a life they want. And I was in the program for 2 years. I graduated in 2014. They offered me a job as a discrimination assistant. I've been here for 3 years.
When people see us as people that have abilities, then people look at us like we are successful, and it puts us in the driver's seat of our lives. Everybody wins when we all contribute to our community and we give as much as we take. Unfortunately, we see that many people with disabilities grow up under the shadows of low expectation syndrome. People with disabilities have their lives, pretty much their beliefs stripped from them, from people who have these preconceived notions of basically how we should live our life.
So number 10, our number 10 ingredient is to help make sure that everyone in the group is on the same page. And I think as an ally, a really great opportunity to do this is when you're having your officers meetings before the big group meetings or before events. Support peer leaders to talk about how they're going to explain new ideas and complicated information, so everyone in the group is on the same page. A lot of times maybe you'll have something on your meeting agenda for the local group, or you'll be going to the State House, or you'll be doing something maybe around a budget, like the state budget or some advocacy issue, and stuff. There's a lot of lingo. There's a lot of alphabet soup. So making sure that your leadership team, sort of gets the alphabet soup ahead of time, and you guys figure out how are you going to talk about it as a group so everyone's on the same page. And then during meetings, thinking about some strategies using, like maybe pictures, plan ahead of time. So if you're going to be talking about a budget and all you have is like, a lot of numbers on a page, so maybe think about ways that you could make a budget that, includes graphics and, things that make it, people connect to it. So it's not just another boring sort of spreadsheet. Use examples, and since allies tend to know people in the group pretty well, use examples that connect to people's lives. It can be really helpful for you to be the note taker in a meeting, so maybe on a big flip chart or a whiteboard so that everyone can see it. And then I think it's important too not to put one person on the spot when you're checking to see if everyone's on the same page. So not to just say, "Hey, Skye, do you understand what we're talking about?" But to make sure, peers are asking it if everyone understands what's going on. And because a lot of times if you say, "Hey, are you with us?" Somebody, even if they don't understand, is going to say yes because it might be embarrassing. And for example, if I go to my mechanic and they say something, well, the nozzle hose and the carburetor, does that make sense? And I'm like, yes. No, it doesn't make any sense to me, but I just say yes because I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. I think that's a lot of people have that experience. So it's important to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak up and peers are able to help each other get the information and get on the same page and do it in a way that's kind of fun and doesn't make people feel like they're being left behind. As Hopper was talking about those ding, ding, ding moments, sort of checking in to make sure people are really understanding. And then being willing to sort of shift gears and say it in a different way and, figure out what's going to work better and not getting stuck and saying the same thing over and over again. Because I've done that before, I know, where I just feel like I'm explaining something differently, but I'm really just saying it again and again. It's kind of like when you're stuck in the mud, you're just getting more and more stuck in the mud. So that can be it's something that I think you have to do to practice a lot. If you don't practice it, you don't get any better at it. Tammy or Topper, Max, Randy, has anything they want to add? Oh, good. I think Topper is going to talk about number 11.
I am. Thank you so much. Got distracted there for a second. Sorry. So this slide is all about being open to making mistakes and learning. And I kind of want to just dive into some practical ways to do that. For me, what's been most helpful as an ally is to debrief. So, and I probably can be even annoying sometimes to self-advocates because I'm always trying to debrief. But, after we just have had a meeting or just had an officers meeting, you know, just building it into the agenda to just say, okay, let's talk about the meeting we just had. I have in the past used and I'd like to use, so give me an A+ and a C- for this meeting we just had, and not to discuss the content of the meeting, but to discuss how it went regarding me being an ally and stepping back and, you know, and then when I stepped forward, you know, like, did that make sense? And so I just think you have to get into the habit of doing that. So if you just went to some meeting and you're with a senator, you're at the legislature, and afterwards, you know, before you move on to the next thing, like, say, let's just take 5 minutes to talk about how that meeting went, and just say, you know, where are some times that maybe I should have stepped back a little bit more and gave you more opportunities to speak, and or, you know, did I make too many suggestions? And people will tell you, people will be honest. I mean, you know, I have the I just am so privileged to be able to work with Randy Lazat and with Max Barrows and all the other amazing self-advocates at Green Mountain Self-Advocates. And people will tell you, like, well, you really didn't need to say that, or you could have said, or, you know, it was okay that you came in at that point and asked me that question. That was really helpful. Because, you know, you need to have, and it's a two-way street. It's not just, you know, you thinking in your own mind about how things went. You need to have feedback from everybody as to how stuff went. And then on a more formal basis, it is really important to do evaluations. And so I know that a lot of allies volunteer, and you might think like, oh my goodness, I'm already giving a lot of time and effort and now I'm going to be evaluated. But I think it's just really helpful. And if you already have a pattern that after each meeting, you sit back and you've already been doing this debrief where you're evaluating the A+ and C-. And by C-, it just means like, oh, here's something here's something that didn't go that smoothly, and how could it go better the next time? Anyway, so when you do an evaluation, that's just that whole, you know, it's just kind of a debrief, but on a larger scale, maybe on the last 6 months or the last year. So anyways, it's just, I think it's a really important ingredient to being an ally.
Yeah, and Topper, I just want to also say, like, I think also like having someone like, you know, like I'll ask Max, or I'll, you know, Randy, someone at a meeting, like, was that, you know, getting feedback and support, I think too. And then, or I'll ask you, I'll say, like, I think I did a really, you know, I think I could have done that really differently. Like, what do you think? Or like, man, that was really hard. Like, can we just get a little bit of support? I think that's important for people to find their sort of the folks that they can lean on and get like that kind of honest feedback. You know, like, and they may not be in your group, but I think that's, you know, that's part of what the GMSA network, I think, can do too. You can find people who could be you know, who you can kind of loop stuff through with. Like, I loop stuff through Topper all the time. Sorry, I just wanted to toss that in because I find that has really helped me, you know, as I've become more involved in the self-advocacy movement as an ally.
And Skye and Tammy, we just wanted to, and Randy wanted to just do a time check. We have about 10 minutes left. Does that make sense to you all?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
So the next thing is have fun. Make the groups fun. You know, I think of me when I have to sit in meetings and they're so boring and they drag on. When you're at your meetings, do fun things. Make it fun, but be able to learn things too. Learn new things, but always make it fun. That's what I strive to do.
Yeah, it's a real, I think, privilege to be an ally. And I think that, just like Tammy said, I mean, I think that it's something that, you know, it's a, you know, a lot of work, and people put, you know, it's like anything that you're working on, you know, you put a lot of dedication in, you care about it. But I think if you're not having fun with it, then I think that it's good to shake it up so that you are, because it's an amazing, it's this amazing sort of experience to have, because you just are connecting with people and learning, and you just have to.
So I think we're going to move on to the next slide. Some key areas where allies should offer support.
I would say one area is officer meetings, and when it comes to officer meetings, allies supporting them to happen is key, and support them to meet ahead of time to make an agenda. Allies make sure nothing falls through the cracks. This way, the agendas come from peer leaders. Officers or the leadership team should plan how they will take turns facilitating each agenda item. Having an agenda item in advance is essential if supporting, staff are going to help self-advocates who do not speak to be able to prepare for the meeting, like bringing in like pre-typed check-in messages and other messages geared to what is on the agenda, and also bringing in like photos or objects they can share as a way for them to contribute to an agenda item.
And Max, what about group goals? I know a lot of times, I'm going to turn it over to you, but a lot of times when groups get in touch with me and say, well, we don't really know what to do, or we've kind of run out of ideas, or we're kind of stale. I know that you always say, like, well, what are your group goals? And what's the structure that we've kind of been using over the years at GMSA for group goals?
I would say there are, each group should be working, and we encourage groups to be working on 4 goals each year. And so that's like, self-advocacy goal, something you want to speak up about. Educational or learning goal, something that you want to teach others or be taught more. I would say a fun or social goal, something that you want to do as a group for fun. And then 4th is a community service goal, where groups would go out into the community and give back. And everything that happens in the group must come from self-advocates, and they need to pick their goals and activities. And once the group has chosen their goals, the officers or leadership team with help from the allies, can identify guests, speakers of what kinds of workshops to teach about whatever topic it is. But also to GMSA, like our organization, can give groups a list of examples of activities done by other groups in each of the goal areas.
I do want to give a positive shout out for checking in. And one of the things we have in the GMSA handbook is kind of some elaborate directions about how to do a check-in. I've noticed more and more, like some of the groups that really, the self-advocates are really doing great, and they're really taking charge and they're running things, they've gotten so business-oriented sometimes that they tend to kind of say, oh, we don't really have time for check-in. And I got to say that both Max and I, and I don't know what Randy thinks on this, but we have a tendency to really kind of say, hey, this is a situation where you need to slow down. And, sometimes people really just, they hold on to what they want to say and check in for a long time, and they know this is a place where they can come and be accepted and share what's on their mind. And I would strongly support allies to just, don't give up on check-ins. Check-ins are really a very important part of the self-advocacy groups, and it's where people can role model and learn, they can role model how to give emotional support to each other for something that comes up, and they can role model how to turn to your peers to problem solve. Anyways, I know we're near the end of time here, but I just really have to give a shout out to check-ins and make sure that check-ins are still part of the regular group.
I second that.
So we want to move on to the next one, Skye?
Yep. And we've hit on a little bit of this, but just talking and thinking about maybe your group could write a job description for what they want, you to do as an ally. That can be really helpful in terms of making sure that you know what your roles are, and that, being organized and prepared, and we've talked about this, but using the GMSA handbook, because it has tons of tips and suggestions for how to be prepared to be an ally for a group. And we can connect you to lots and lots of other information that's out there. There's a National Ally Listserv. GMSA can connect you to other groups. There's a National Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, the SARTAC, is another great way to connect with people. So we'll be sending out this information in the emails and the follow-up call. And Max, did you want to add anything to this slide, or do you want me to? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I would say, how GMSA, Green Mountain Self-Advocacy, can help with this. I would say, we're good at providing resources for allies. Sometimes an ally email list and Facebook page. We, of course, have information on our web page for groups. We also have trainings for groups and allies, and ideas about activities. And then we connect, we can with allies through a buddy system based on, interest. And we, of course, have our, fabulous handbook that has everything and anything you need to know about running groups.
And we're not going to do questions, but I just want to point out that there's 4 really great resources that we'll email to you all. There's the GMSA handbook, there's Owning Your Organization, Advising Through Self-Determination, and a curriculum for self-advocates. And these were written by partner organizations, and GMSA contributed to several of them. And a lot of the information from this slideshow is from these great resources. So we have to give them a big shout out, but also we'll point you so you can look more thoroughly at them, because they're really full of amazing examples and lots of good detail. So they're good resources. We'll get to you. And thank you. That brings us to the end of our webinar. Anyone want to add anything else before we sign off?
I hope that this webinar is helpful, and those who will hear us in the future coming across this through our recording, I encourage you to take all this information, because it's helpful, and I hope that you guys use it as a tool to become better allies, because I believe in you all. Thanks.
Thanks.